Immigration in the Gilded Age shaped America into the country it is today. Immigration, new and old, provided the means for America's development. Although immigration wasn't always perceived as beneficial, it had its lasting positive effects. America took interest in the New World after the Spanish conquistadors discovered gold and silver. Colonial immigration was promising opportunity to all for various different reasons. The British were the largest group of settlers, and many of them came to the New World as indentured servants. Pilgrims and Puritans settled in the New World to escape religious persecution in their home country. Other English travelers came to escape economic problems, such as the loss of farmland to sheep ranchers and a decline in the textile industry. The colonies also became home to African, German, French, Irish, and Dutch travelers. The colonies encouraged further immigration, opening their arms to immigrants with any sort of background and social class.
Yes, sir, that's my baby, no.
Between 1880 and 1920, German and Irish immigrants came to the Americas. Despite the horrors of treatment, housing, and factory work, many of them agreed that the wages that they could earn here and the food that they could eat surpassed their former realities. These new settlers were responsible for the creation of Little Italy, Greektown, and Chinatown. Over 25% of these German and Irish immigrants didn't intend on becoming American citizens.
New immigrants, as they were called, were people who came to America from parts of the world that had never really interacted with America before. And that includes Poland and Russia and Italy, but also like China and Japan. And the influx of these peoples from these strange parts of the world really caused a lot of tension in a already tense setting in America. And many Americans did not like this. And so these Americans were often outcasted or treated as lesser or many things such as this, and they were often used as the manual labor.
New immigration was the influx of new citizens from Southern and Eastern Europe as well as parts of Asia. These immigrants came to America in search of better lives, although they were rarely welcomed by old immigrants. Nativism refers to a political sentiment in which favors greater rights and privileges to native-born Americans. Nativists formed many groups, including the Know Nothing Party and the Immigration Restriction League. These political organizations aim to restrict the rights of immigrants. Political nativism first emerged during the 1840s in the form of local American parties protesting immigration influences in cities such as New York and Philadelphia. A secret organization against immigration, the Order of the Star-Spangled Banner, formed in 1849 and developed into the Know Nothing Party. It focused on the opposition to Catholicism and immigration. In 1854, the party emerged as a major political force. They got support from native-born workers who didn't want their jobs taken by immigrants, former Whigs, and Democratic opposers. The Know Nothing Party won many state elections in Massachusetts, Maryland, Kentucky, and Texas. However, the party split and collapsed when forced to take a stand on the issue of slavery.
You want to know why they called the American Party the Know Nothing Party? Well, it's because when members were asked about their role in the organization, they responded, "I know nothing."
In the 1880 census, there were 106,000 Chinese immigrants. Majority were men who lived in the U.S. and continued to threaten American citizens with their zeal to work at low wages. This caused America to greatly resent Chinese immigration and push for an act to restrict and even cease immigration completely. In 1882, the Americans got what they wanted. President Chester Arthur signed the first major law restricting immigration on May 6, 1882. The act stood to completely cut off Chinese immigrants, even people with Chinese heritage from other countries, from entering the U.S., and required any Chinese attempting to immigrate to have an official certificate proving their right to be in the U.S. This act was declared to stand effectively for 10 years after it was passed. Most Chinese immigrants migrated back home to China, while the few that stayed felt animosity toward their urban neighborhoods and were forced to move to Chinatown to be with their own.
Go back to the 1924 Immigration Act, which was set in place what was called the National Origins Quota Formula. And what that did was tie immigration to the existing population of the United States. And by doing that, the creators of that legislation made sure that they would preserve the Northern and Western European composition of the United States.
The National Origins Act of 1924 put in place even more restrictions regarding foreign immigration into the United States. The United States proceeded to only allow a certain number of granted immigration entries for each nationality. The number of immigrants allowed was established by calculating 2% of each nationality existence in the 1890 National Census. However, the laws preventing naturalization of Asians made Chinese and Japanese immigration impossible. This infuriated Japan and added serious tension on the Japanese-American relations. By 1927, Great Britain and Ireland's immigration fell 19%, while Italy's immigration into America fell more than 90%. The new act in 1927 changed the rule of 2% to a set number of only 150,000 total immigrants. The ratio of admittance from each country was then based on a country's representation in the 1920 American Census. Also, immigrants were required to obtain a visa to gain access into the United States, adding yet another obstacle into immigration. The provision outlined in 1927 took effect in 1929, and immigration equality didn't see the light until 1965, when immigration systems were abolished.
Well, Americans in the Gilded Age were very in favor of the National Origins Acts. They felt that immigrants were a threat to Americans. They thought they were taking their jobs, messing with their ways of life, which is why the National Origins Acts were just so in favor of.
The Immigration Restriction League was an organization founded by a group of Harvard graduates in 1894 to limit immigration. League members blamed immigrants for the country's problems in the 1880s and 1890s. The Immigration Restriction League believed that immigrants played a large role in socioeconomic struggles occurring during the time period, such as poverty, labor unrest, crime, violence, and other urban crowding. The organization separated the old and new immigrants. The League's main proposal was a required literacy test for the new immigrants wishing to immigrate to the United States. Though this proposal was passed in Congress as a pet bill, President Grover Cleveland vetoed it. The failure of a literacy test proposal is one example of the many unsuccessful nativist efforts during the Gilded Age.
My grandfather was part of the IRL. He heard about it when he was going to Harvard University. He knew right away that he wanted to join. He hated immigrants, he hated Catholics, and he hated what they were doing to the country.
Assimilation is the merging of foreign cultures in a country where they begin to resemble one another. And the Hull House was a facility for these merging cultures where immigrants could receive an education that was located in Chicago.
You encounter diversity. That is, you run a company, you work for an institution, or you rule a nation. You realize that people who come have different backgrounds, have different faith, have different color of skin, and also different characteristics. For instance, different IQ or abilities. So, in order to manage them, you have to somehow deal with diversity. Traditionally, in our Western tradition, we have two approaches. Either you say, hey, my organization, my nation, my company is a melting pot, and we want everybody, no matter how different initially this person is, to become a standardized member of our organization, able to cooperate very well with the rest. Or, another approach, let us preserve our diverse identities, and then let's behave more like pieces of tomato, lettuce, or cucumber in a salad. It's called the salad bowl approach, because in this way, by preserving diversity, we'll be able to be more creative and out of the clash and comparison, much more creative and perhaps better future solution will be born. The only problem is that we have to watch out for taking some of the groups which stand out in the salad bowl much more in the melting pot, and we then may scapegoat them, discriminate them.
The term melting pot refers to the idea that societies formed by immigrant cultures, religions, and ethnic groups will produce a new hybrid culture. The notions come from a pot in which metals are melted together at great heat, coming together into a new compound, with great strength and other combined advantages. Along with assimilation and the melting pot, another theory came about in the Gilded Age. With so many contradicting and original cultures coming into the United States, blending and merging of American and foreign cultures wasn't always the case. The salad bowl theory provided a new idea that America was a bowl that held the varying lifestyles of different nations that were independent of one another and simply commingled with another, like lettuce and tomatoes and so on a salad bowl. This theory especially came about when the large influx of immigrants into the United States and the negative views Americans had toward them. Because the foreigners' customs were so different and perpendicular to America's, national inclination was to isolate them in their ways. This clash and resistance to opposing ways of life served as the breeding grounds for the salad bowl theory. The Gilded Age was a monumental decade in terms of immigration. It encompassed the first immigration restriction laws, bred new views on assimilation, and brought countless numbers of foreigners from varying backgrounds. The actions during the Gilded Age will forever shape the future of America.